So thank you for taking the time to sit down with me.
My pleasure.
Of course, and I had one thing I actually wanted to start with, which I don't know if you'll necessarily be expecting this, but I know I forget if it was a stream or a podcast we were on, but you mentioned you play board games.
Oh yeah, I think we talked a little bit about that during that
I'm I would
honeycast,
love to
maybe?
talk. Yeah, that's right. I
Yeah,
would
yeah.
love to talk more about that because
Oh, sure.
I'm a big board game fan,
I've noticed
and I'm
that,
I'm
yeah.
and I hear you play some good shit. So I'm curious what you have
Yeah,
been some of your favorites.
I'm a little kind of I wouldn't say novice exactly, but I've kind of only just like dipped my toe in because I was working in the game industry, like
Hmm.
PC games and mobile games, and left that to do the comic full time. But I have remained
Hmm.
friends with my former colleagues, and we started getting together once or twice a week, 2018, 2019, to play board games.
Hmm.
One of my friends is one of these guys who any like Kickstarter that comes along with like a nice
Hmm.
big elaborate game, he will he will pledge
I'm
and
that
get the
guy.
full.
Or well,
Yeah.
not the Kickstarter guy, but I'm the guy with like here's 80 new games to play.
Yes, he has like a few walls just like stacked with shelves of games, and we've maybe
Hmm.
gotten through like 3% of them at best. But yeah, we've been playing lots of little indie things, one-off things, and also some of the bigger like legacy game things.
Sure.
Somewhat ironically, kind of right before the pandemic hit, we were playing Pandemic Legacy, and yeah, got through that entire
Hmm.
game, which I really enjoyed. Had a lot of fun with
Season
that.
one.
Yeah, yeah, season one.
Yeah, it's
We've
a
been
great
wanting to
game.
delve into season two, of course, but because of the situation, we haven't been meeting. I'm kind of depressed about that. Honestly, it was like my refuge from, like, I have a hard
Mm,
time stepping away from work. You know, working at home
sure.
and everything. It's hard to like delineate between that like work time, playtime thing. But having a
Right.
place I could go to, like friend's house where I could like just hang out and play board games. That was like my one like real true escape from just thinking about lackadaisy comic, lackadaisy cartoon, and everything like that. So
You can think of it this way, though. It'll be you'll be more invigorated to defeat the virus
true,
when
true.
you
Yes,
revisit this.
it'll there will be this casts a whole new, yeah, sort of like lighted character on the game. I suppose might be a
Right.
little more uh aggressive about our gameplay style. I don't know, but
Yeah.
yeah, that and we had recently done was it Betrayal at on House on the Hill?
House on the Hill.
Yeah, how
Mm.
actually it was the legacy version of the game that we were playing. So it was
Mm.
that long elaborate one that kind of like hopped around through different time periods of history. So you
Sure.
get kind of that like that Victorian stuff with sort of Bram Stoker style storytelling, and then you kind of like hop along into like the early 20th century, and you start getting that Lovecraftian flavor in there. And I thought that
Mm.
was pretty neat. I did enjoy like the flavor of that game. Not exactly like a mentally challenging one entirely, but it was fun. It was fun. I liked it.
Have you played the original of that game, the
No, I know.
non-legacy version?
No,
Mm.
I know there's a original game, but and I know that my friend has it. I hadn't joined the group yet when they played that. So
Gotcha.
and then there's
Yeah.
like I've been eyeballing Gloomhaven because I think that's kind of my cup of tea as far as like flavor of game style goes. So
Mm.
like he's got the big
It's
Gloomhaven box there. I'm like, yeah, when are we gonna get that one cracked open? So um but yeah.
Gloomhaven is very good.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, as far as those games go, yeah, I'm in a similar boat in that I'm dying to play season 2 of Pandemic Legacy. We played through the first one. I have Betrayal Legacy. I have actually a lot of Legacy games. I don't know why I keep buying them as if I'm ever going to play all these, but I feel like I'm probably similar to your friend in that way.
Yeah.
And then Gloomhaven, I think we're about 30% through, and I will say it is pretty amazing.
Yeah.
It is. So if you do get the chance to play it, it
Yeah,
is
I'm eager.
the gameplay itself is just fucking great. Like, so well designed. Are you a high fantasy person fan at all?
Yes. In fact, like
Okay.
my early years in art, like I I was a pretty nerdy kid, played a lot of D&D with my cousins, and all my cousins were boys, and so they were always into like D&D and Magic and Magic the
Mm,
Gathering and everything like that. And so I would participate in that sort of stuff. I think my initial interest was always like the accompanying artwork, so I would be drawn
mm,
in by that, and then I would end up playing the games with them and things. So, so yeah, like that's really kind of my background. I have I still have like these old D&D books from like the second edition and
mm.
third edition and things like Monsters Manual and everything. And I think at one point I went through and like drew as a kid, like drew every monster in the Monsters Manual and kind of like
Nice.
imitating the professional artists who had illustrated those books. And I think I learned a lot doing that. Like got a lot of my like self education sort of like mimicking that sort of like fantasy art stuff. And
Mm,
so yeah, definitely into swords and sorcery, like high fantasy stuff. And then I did like a long time ago, starting when I was maybe in like junior high, I had written this story that was about like animal characters in a medieval setting as well. So yeah, it was
mm.
that's like has long been my area of interest, and I still have a softness for it. Kind of like moved on to other eras and taken interest in other more historical settings, but yeah,
Sure, sure.
really love the high fantasy stuff.
I
Um,
I am curious because you mentioned a couple things I'd like to just ask about. I mean, like your art is some of the most gorgeous I've ever seen in like anything.
oh wow, thanks.
And I'm just curious, is that uh like how much of that is self-taught, how much of that is like formal lessons or like classes?
I didn't go to any kind of formal art schooling. I did,
Mm,
as a kid, visit. There was a local teacher who taught at a private school. I was like an art teacher at a private school, kind of like I think like several tiers up, maybe from like what you'd get at a public school art class, just because
sure.
they had the funding and everything, so or they had the budget to equip a classroom with better than like giant crayons and like tempera paints and things like that.
Yeah, yeah.
So and she was a big help. Like I would go on Saturday mornings. Like my parents kind of knew that I was a very quiet kid. I would just kind of like cloister myself away and sequester myself away and draw for hours on end. And so they like I wasn't really into playing team sports and things like that. So they decided like to get me out of the house. That was the thing they were gonna let me go do. And so
Mm,
for several years during my childhood, I would go like Saturday mornings and hang out with this art teacher, and like I would have access to some art supplies and things that I otherwise wouldn't have been able to get my hands on. So that certainly helped a lot, and that's probably where I started getting the idea that like art was a potential career option. My parents certainly did not
mm.
agree with that. I think they were kind of horrified to find that they had planted that seed, but accidentally. But I mean, they thought of it kind of more as like, oh, as a hobby, here's a thing to pass your time with. But yeah,
I see.
it wasn't really formal training so much, and other than that, it was just like public school art classes and just me being, a quiet nerdy kid who just liked to sit and draw and I'd watch things on TV and draw what I was seeing, mostly, like Disney, Don Bluth, Looney Tunes stuff, and
Mm,
I would like I was obsessed with Calvin and Hobbes, so I would
mm.
redraw those comics and read them over and over again. And yeah, I think like if you look at the work I've done, is probably fairly apparent, like what my inspirations were. I don't know, um,
Mm,
kind of all of that stuff, sort of like just all that like fantasy D&D stuff and or like high fantasy sort of flavor plus the like the comic sensibilities borrowed from Bill Watterson and and then like
yeah.
the Don Bluth influence, like kind of just all like accumulated, coagulated into whatever I'm doing. So
Sure, sure.
yeah, yeah.
What do your parents think of it now?
They have come around as far as like it being a career, because I mean I've been making my living doing art for a number of years
Sure.
now, but it was definitely a very contentious thing around high school when I
Mm,
was starting to consider colleges I wanted to go to, and I was wanting to go study art, and they were like, no. They were going to be, footing part of my tuition bill. The deal was like I would take out loans and get as many scholarships as I could, and they would help foot the
Sure.
bill for some of the rest. And they were like, but we're not going to do that if you don't study something practical. And so it was biology for me instead of art.
Ah.
Um, so yeah, I went to school as a bio major with an art minor, an art
Mm,
minor anyway, and that didn't actually pan out because I left school to take a job full time as an artist,
mm,
which did not please them either. I think they thought that was like some kind of harebrained escapade on my part, in which I
mm,
moved away from home to a city where I'd never been before. Didn't know
mm.
anybody. What had happened is I while I was in college, I put up my website and started posting my art online and started
Sure.
taking on like commission work and doing little gigs for RPG books and things like that.
Yeah, yeah.
And just doing like individual commissions and things, and this programmer from a small game developer out in St. Louis spotted my art and just decided for whatever reason that they liked the style, and they were looking for 2D artists at the time. And so sent me an email and said, "Oh, you want to come out for an interview?" And that kind of blew me away because at this point in time, I was like, I did not think I was employable in like in that capacity as an artist.
Mm.
Um, and there had been a lot of like arguments with parental figures about about that sort of
Sure,
thing. A lot of
sure.
like hurtful words exchanged. They had good intentions. I think they just were concerned that
Yeah.
not a viable career option. And I think they maybe had like that sort of like mental image of someone like sitting on a street corner trying to sell paintings and maybe like
Right,
using their
right.
own artwork to cover themselves from the rain or something like that. And like
Uh-huh.
the starving artist trope, which I don't know that they realized, or I think maybe a lot of people don't realize when their children say something as horrifying as like, yeah, I want to be an artist when I grow up. That
Mhm.
everything is art, that everything we consume,
Mm.
every commercial you watch, every ad you see, every cartoon and movie and computer game and video and console game and website and piece of apparel that you have on that has like some kind of design to it, like everything, there's art everywhere, and
Sure.
all of this is jobs that people have that they do. And so I think like when you say artist, like maybe the mental image is like somebody who hangs things in a gallery and sells paintings or something, but that's really
Right.
like there's like artistes in that regard, and then there's artists who are more on like the practical commercial side of things.
Right, right.
And then there's like a hazy area in between where you can kind of like straddle both of those worlds. But yeah, anyway, ended up with that job out in St. Louis, and moved away from home. I was like 18 years old at the time, so
Wow.
yeah, I was a kid still and didn't know anything, but it was definitely like how I ended up growing up, I think.
Sure, sure.
It turned out to be a incredible learning experience. I think I probably learned more on the job than I would have in a classroom
Mm.
environment anyway.
Basically just by doing.
Yeah, by doing.
Yeah.
It was like pressure to like, well, we need you to do this thing, so you just have to learn to do it. So I started out as a 2D artist. They're doing this was like a company that had been around since like the days of Genie, and like Prodigy
Mm.
and things like that, when people paid by the hour for like their internet time,
Sure,
which is
sure.
like inconceivable right now. But like they had started out with these text-based MMORPGs, basically like proto MMORPGs, basically big muds. Um,
Mm-mm.
and they'd been running for years and years, and so they needed someone to come in and like do like these little auxiliary illustrations and things that fit into the game. But at the same time, they were starting to develop 3D games and more graphical games, and so the need arose for me to kind of transition from being a 2D artist to being a 3D artist. And so they kind of
Mm.
like put Autodesk 3D Studio Max in front of me, and they're like, yeah, well, you're going to need to learn this. And so I did. I started messing around with it, and discovered 3D art, and it's something I don't think I ever would have. If I'd gone to art school, I think I would have like been very. I would have adhered to 2D art only, and but the 3D, like,
Mm.
that was the job requirement, that was the job need, and I picked it up and tried it, and I actually really enjoyed it. To my surprise, I really quite enjoyed like more or
Mm.
less sculpting in 3D and building characters out, rigging them, texturing them. And so yeah, that was my experience there for a long time. I did a lot of 3D art, character animation. Kind of floated over into a more managerial position as like as the company grew a bit. We hired on
Mm.
a bunch of additional artists. I was just like kind of the artist who'd been there the longest at that point and on a full-time basis. And so I ended up kind of like de facto art director. And that is more or less how I started the comic because I stopped doing hands-on work so much and sort of when you're just like reviewing portfolios and delegating work and your
Mm.
entire day is like filled up with that and providing feedback and compiling art bibles and things like that, then you're not really doing like painting and drawing and animating and character design. You're just kind of like a manager, and I was going a bit nuts doing that. I kind of
Sure.
like it's like sometimes being the worker bee is like the more desirable like thing. You kind of just, especially if
Because
you're
you actually
like,
get to do the fun stuff,
yeah,
sort
especially
of.
if you're in a creative field, like otherwise you have all that like pressure on you for like all the weight of like deadlines and like appeasing the higher ups and everything is on your shoulders, whereas if
Mm.
you're the artist, like you can kind of more focus more on just the creative aspect of your job and not all the
Sure.
you know so anyway, yeah, during the nighttime hours I would my um creative outlet became the comic that I still do today. So, yeah, that's my, in a nutshell, my,
Which is a great comic. Lackadaisy for those who are not familiar. Uh, just to go. I mean, I'm sure they've already Googled who if they didn't know. Like I don't do like formal introductions on this podcast just because I like to jump right into it. But
yeah.
if you haven't already, Google Lackadaisy. Lackadaisy comic is probably the best way to. What's the actual
Yeah, it's
URL?
just lackadaisy.com. So,
Lackadaisy.com.
yeah, it's like if you were to spell just the word like lack a daisy, but just string it into one word.
Mhm. It's also in the description, probably. I'm sure I put it in there as well. But
Cool.
I was gonna say, hearing all that, I think there's a lot of value hearing somebody like just putting their stuff online, right? Just just posting your work. I always a lot of people ask like, how do I get into this? How do I get into that creative field? Or for me, it's always like, how do you get into voice acting? And it's
Yeah,
really
I mean,
you kind of just have to put
you,
yourself out there,
exactly. Yeah, yeah. I mean,
uh
the internet is like I probably I would not have a career as an artist had the internet not been around at that
mhm.
moment when I decided, oh, I'm just going to build a website and start putting art out there, and that led to jobs, which led to other jobs, which led to meeting lots of people. Yeah, I mean, like all of the networking and professional connections I've
Mhm.
made have been basically by putting my work out there on the internet and taking advantage of that sort of stuff and just kind of like rolling with the changes. Like there was no social media in the sense that we have it now. When I first started, like DeviantArt
Sure.
wasn't even around yet.
Wow.
But there were like art forums and things like that, like
Yeah, yeah. Mhm.
PHP sort of things. And
Sure.
that's where you'd like go and hang out and like share your work and chat with other artists. And then like DeviantArt came along, and that created kind of like a sense of art community on the internet that I think hadn't really existed before. And that's where a
Mm.
lot of the people I'm working with now, on the animated short, that's where I like first encountered them, like the director on the project. That's where I found them on DeviantArt
Mm.
many years ago. Um, but yeah, I mean that's really what you got to do. Every young artist who comes along and they're like, how do I even begin to you know start a project like this or get a thing funded or whatever, and it's like just start putting your work out there. And I've never like people approach me and ask like like what sort of advertising did you do? I'm like, none that was like deliberate advertising. I never bought an ad
Sure.
or anything anywhere. Or like put up a sign or a billboard or even like bought banner space anywhere. It's just like put your work out there. And that's, I mean, when it comes to visual arts, that's what, you know, speaks for itself. I'm sure that's much the same case with like your audio and audio video stuff. Like, I mean,
Mm.
what was your like did you have was your specific goal to basically become a voice actor, or did you kind of just become that? Was it like the like natural
Mm.
end to, well, not end, but the natural like result of like what you were just enjoying doing?
Oh,
Or
it was always the goal.
oh, okay.
It was the goal since high school
Wow.
was to I developed a love for acting, specifically voice acting in high school, because a friend of mine would write radio plays, and we would like just sort of record them as friends. And at first, like, oh, this is kind of fun. And then like there was one particular one where it just really clicked, and I fell in love with. It wasn't just like, oh, I'm just like reading like silly things with my friends. It's, oh, I'm actually like really in it. I feel like I have
Actually
really
performing.
actually performing, but also like getting into the head of the character and really just sort of losing myself in it. And
Nice.
when that happened, um, I was basically hooked. I'd always been interested
Hmm.
in voice actors for a long time as a kid, because I was one of those kids who would watch cartoons and read the credits
Hmm.
because I would recognize, oh, that's Tom Kenny, or I didn't know at the time, but I was like, I know, I've heard that guy in somebody some other cartoon, and I would start to memorize like, oh yeah, that's Tom Kenny, and then,
Hmm.
oh, I can hear him if I hear him in this role or that role.
Yeah.
But I never thought as a kid that I would ever do it myself. But then in high school, it was around that time where, and I know a lot of other voice actors my age around that same time. There were, you know, there were forums, right?
Hmm.
There were voice acting forums. There were
Yeah, yeah.
that sort of thing where a lot of, you know,
That's
people would just sort of
yeah,
collaborate
same
and,
like
you
mini art
know.
community that, yeah, that illustrators and things would sort of gather around. So, yeah.
Everything I've basically done online was towards that goal because I
Wow.
had no idea how I was going to get into it.
Hmm.
And then, I mean, one thing that I think you, we encountered each other in my early stages of that sort of journey, in
Yeah.
which that was the ProZD Voices Tumblr,
Yes, your Tumblr,
which
yep.
yes, which was
Yeah.
right after college. It was, I don't know how
Wow.
much you know about this, but like the whole story behind that Tumblr.
I
Um,
don't know. I figured it was just like you were just like putting your work out there like I was basically, and like kind of, I don't know if you, yeah, I don't know if I understood how seriously you were like how seriously you took it at the time, but like I
sure,
heard what
sure.
you had recorded, and I don't know if you tagged me in something or if somebody just pointed it out to me, and I
Mm-mm.
can't remember, but I was definitely really impressed with what you had done. It was like, I mean, people had done some recording and things before, but it was like what you were doing was definitely like you know, order of magnitude like more put together and just like good.
Mm. Well,
um
I appreciate that.
yeah.
The Tumblr, and I've talked about this on the podcast before, but basically, on it was after I graduated from college, I had no idea how I was gonna get into voiceover. I was like,
Hmm.
I don't know what the fuck I'm gonna do. So, this was I still remember very distinctly. I think like if I graduated in, let's say, this summer, or what, I forget exactly when, the fall, after I'd like tried to, oh, can I get jobs like on like film sets? And I was like, I don't really want to work on a film set because
Yeah.
my major was media arts and technology, which was like video, audio,
Yeah.
and I was like, I know what I really want to do, and I'm gonna just, you know what, I'm gonna try to do it. And it was, so that was me starting the Tumblr,
Mhm.
and I said, starting today, I'm going to post one audio post every day
Wow.
and not skip a day. And I did that for years. I did
Wow.
that starting 2012, probably till 2015. I did not miss a single day.
That's intense.
Uh,
Wow.
it was very intense, and so so when I hear your story,
Hmm.
and it's funny, like the previous guest I talked to, we had a very similar experience where it was like, I don't know, we don't know how we're gonna get into this field, but I know what I want to do. All I can do now is just, and I also had no idea, I had no intention of getting an audience. It was really just supposed to be my sort of, hey, this is like like me and my then girlfriend, now wife, and a
Hmm.
couple of my friends follow this Tumblr. And hey guys, this is just me dicking around. I'm gonna post. I'm just pick a monologue, pick a thing every day, but
Hmm.
I'm gonna do it every day.
Hmm.
Um, and then I started just doing stuff. I did like I took stuff from like I don't know if you're familiar with Ace Attorney. Like
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
I love Ace Attorney, so I was like, well, that's full of characters that don't have voices, and I can come up with voices, and I can just read dialogue. It's all just great dialogue. I can and practice.
Yeah.
And then I've been a big fan of Lackadaisy since when did Lackadaisy start?
2006. I'm almost
I
embarrassed to say.
I no, I definitely was a fan right around that time because I
Wow.
remember on LiveJournal, which some of the
Yeah, that
listeners here
was.
have no idea what that
I
is,
know.
but LiveJournal, I think a friend of mine was like I think a friend of mine or a couple of friends of mine were like, check this out. And I was like, holy shit, this is great. And so, Lackadaisy I just been a fan of. So, 6 years later, as I'm thinking of things I like, what are some stuff that I really like, but I don't want to do impressions necessarily. I just,
Right.
I want to take characters that I like that don't have voices,
Mhm.
but I feel like I know what they would sound like
Yeah.
because I'm such a fan and have good dialogue. And then it just led to Lackadaisy. Uh, and so those were and I will say, a lot of credit to people like you, and I don't know if you're familiar with GGDG,
Yeah.
but
Yep. Yep.
I did some Cucumber Quest stuff back then.
Yep.
It was like Lackadaisy stuff, Cucumber Quest, and then Ace Attorney dubs. And I believe also Professor Layton stuff.
Yep.
That
Yep. I
was
remember.
that was
Yep.
Yeah, that was how I got any audience at all.
Right.
Like it, so I think I've expressed this to you, but I'm very grateful towards you for just you didn't have to like reblog or do anything, and I wasn't expecting anything. I was just like, this is my this is what
Oh well. I
I
mean,
just
yeah. It was
fan work.
so good unto itself, even if like it was worth
Mm,
reblogging, but it also like I can't I'm not like there was certainly a uh aspect of, well, I'm super flattered by this, and like I just want to like show
mm,
people like, look at this is amazing. And
sure.
so yeah, it was like I couldn't not reblog it. It was just such a awesome surprise that someone did that to begin with, and then like did such a good job of it too. It was like um but yeah, and like I'd been getting like a little bit of fan art here and there from people over the time that I'd been working on the comic, but
Sure.
the audio was certainly a much rarer sort of thing to happen upon. So it
Mm,
was like, wow, that's real cool. And but yeah, I guess like maybe it warrants stressing how much doing like fan art and doing stuff that you just like love and
mm,
enjoy can really work to your advantage as like a young artist
absolutely.
starting out and trying to get your foot in the door in some capacity. Like you can kind of just like I don't want to be like, oh yeah, like cynically say you should just draw fan art and build yourself up on that, but like doing your own original material is I'm sure you would agree, like probably like what most artists really want to do.
Mm, mm,
And
mm.
like there's certainly like some pitfalls into like if you become a fan artist and become known as that, it's hard to maybe break away from that because people come at you and they're just going to want to commission you to do more of what they
Mm-mm.
they already like. But you can also kind of like use it as a springboard to just like build an audience.
That is extremely valuable advice, and I actually am surprised I have not mentioned.
Mhm.
Well, I think that's because I did like a how to get into voice acting video, but I think that's a great piece of advice for people who want to like grow an audience.
Yes. Yeah. Like,
Because as much as you know, it it'd be wonderful if everyone's original work could get recognized out of nowhere.
yeah, it's
But unfortunately, the internet is so vast
yes.
that yes, it's what's gonna hook people initially
Hmm.
is, oh, I'm searching for, oh, I like Ace Attorney. Oh, this guy did Ace Attorney voices. Oh, hey, like I like this, and I'm gonna start checking this guy out. And
Hmm.
then, as you grow an audience, I always tell people, like, I've given this exact same advice to a lot of my friends. It's like, you know, like you gotta hook them right with something
Hmm.
first,
Yep.
and then you can go, hey, but also,
Yeah. Let me show
here's
you
my
this.
original work. Here's my original work, or here's this. And I
Exactly.
also, I also am like, also don't chase it if you don't actually enjoy it. Like if you
Right. Yeah.
hate doing fan art,
Right.
don't do it. It's just gonna show. Like
Yeah.
people are
Like,
gonna respond to something where it's like, oh, this person's very not only are they talented, but they're very passionate about it, and that passion, that sense of fun, is what is going to draw me to them. Whereas if you're just like, I'm going to chase whatever is popular,
mhm.
that just leads to
Yeah,
misery
I
in
mean, if
any
in general,
shape or
if
form.
you're doing the thing to chase popularity,
Mm,
that's probably a bad idea. I think you're just gonna end up
mm,
unhappy and unfulfilled,
sure.
because it's, at the end of the day, it's praise from strangers, and that's not, and then even if you end up advancing in like some kind of career path because of that, it's not necessarily what you want to be doing. It's just what maybe gets you the most views or interactions on social
Yeah,
media. And
yeah.
so, yeah, and it like work, I think that comes from the heart, that is like your passion project and your pet project, and things like that, is
Mm,
it kind of shows when an artist is just kind of in love with what they're doing. Kind of shines in a way that I think art that doesn't come from that same place
sure.
doesn't. And so, yeah, I think like anyone trying to do web comics or art or voice acting, like if your primary goal is to just be popular, then maybe rethink like what you're doing,
It
because
will only lead to misery,
yeah,
yeah, because you're just gonna start being focused on numbers, right? And
right,
if something doesn't get the
yeah,
numbers or get the views or get whatever the
yeah, you it
retweets or whatever, you're just going to be unhappy,
yeah.
and you're not even doing stuff you like doing.
Right.
So
And a
there's no
lot of
winner.
yeah, a lot of the like the impetus to keep going is from the enjoyment of the process. So if you're like,
Mm-hmm.
and it's an intense process. Like if you're doing comics, I went into comics
Mm.
not really knowing what I was getting myself into. Um,
Mm.
and just being like, oh, I'll just casually do this in the evenings after work, and it doesn't work that way. It's like
Sure.
it's like you're writing a book and also drawing every single thing that happens in that book, and trying to like you're doing like page layouts, and it's like there's graphic design elements to it with like speech bubbles and dialogue, and yeah, it's this like whole like pile of art forms all in one, and it takes a lot out of you, just to produce a single page. Like it's so time consuming, and it's so involved, and you just have to like be in this certain headspace, and if you aren't enjoying that, it's not going to last. And I'm sure you would
Sure.
probably say the same thing about your daily recordings. Like that is a
Mm,
ton of work.
mm,
That's
mm.
like that takes dedication to putting like any kind of content out there on a daily basis is like, I think maybe a lot of people in the audience don't quite understand or appreciate just how much work goes into it. I've had people say things to me like, "Oh, it must be so nice to be able to, just make your living drawing, cat characters and stuff." It's like, yeah, it is kind of a silly thing to be making a career out of, but it's also a hell of a lot of work. That
I
took a
mean, have they
lot to get
seen
you.
any of your
I
pages?
mean,
Drawing cat
like
characters.
I don't
It's
know
like
if, yeah, I think I'm just like goofing around and not sitting over here like aching and weeping over like a comic page that I've been working on for hours and hours and hours.
that, and
Um,
yours is historical as well, which is
yeah, the
like,
research is
that's just an extra like layer of different
it is
10 layers of difficulty
every
on top
every
of it.
page has these like these challenges, these like rabbit holes I end up going down, because it's like, okay, well, how did you make a long distance phone call in the 1920s, and or like how did you start a car from this particular year? Like, did it have electric ignition? Did it only have a crank start?
Yeah.
There's just every every page, and even just like the dialogue writing, like you have to be like conscientious of the turns of phrase and idioms and slang and
Sure.
things from the time period, and it's really easy to get tripped up by like thinking something like a word or something is like would have been used back then, but it really wasn't. Like you end up like you go to like
Mm-mm.
etymology.com and look it up. It's like, oh, it wasn't like in common parlance until 1955 or something. Like, oh god damn it. I gotta
Yeah,
rewrite
yeah.
this whole line now. But yeah,
I love seeing some of your blurbs where it's like, oh, the word, I'm just making one up. The word, this is not one of them. The word like soda pop didn't come until the year, and I'm like, how the hell does she
yeah.
know?
Well, the reason
Like,
I
learn research all this.
the
Like,
reason I know is because I had to go down like this super specific like
oh man.
rabbit warren of like weird, obscure, obsolete information that like fortunately like the internet does have like a lot of really strange corners where people are just like collectors of random items and are just like really super
Mm,
interested in things like old cars and even more obscure things like old radios and things like that where you can find this
sure.
information, but you have to dig for it, and you have to like double and triple check your material, your like information too, because there's a lot of bad information out there as well. So yeah, it's tricky.
Mm,
It's been like a pretty intense history lesson.
I can tell. I was gonna. This brings up another thing. Like, okay, so not to keep fanboying, but like, okay, your art is already phenomenal, but then the writing is
Jeez.
also really good. Like,
Thanks.
what? Where do you get the nerve to be also like,
I don't know.
like? I'm actually curious. Like, where did you? I mean, well, you mentioned as a kid you wrote like a book, like a story with
Yeah,
characters or whatever.
I was
Did
attempting to write a book with like
mm,
heavy on illustrations. It wasn't a comic, but it was like, I had it in my mind I was gonna be like a George R. R. Martin sort of like, I'm gonna write a bunch of fantasy novels, but it's gonna be all animal
mm.
characters, and of course that never never happened. But yeah, I kind of like messed around with creative writing at that time. Like I'd never done any like creative writing classes, even in like aside from like English assignments and things. But I was
Mm,
always, when I was drawing, it was always like also a practice in character creation, and there was always a
sure.
story to the character and a backstory, and the more you draw the character, you get to know them, and you invent backstories for them, and then they are, they end up interacting with other characters, and they have a interconnected story in some way, and so it just like those pieces just start formulating in your mind as you're drawing, and that's pretty much how Lackadaisy ended up happening. It was just like I had all these like cat characters I used to draw on my. Oh, my cat's about to start a fight. Stop it. Sorry. Um, uh, this is partly my inspiration is my obnoxious cats. But
Mm,
yeah, they were just things I drew as a kid on school notebooks and things, passing time in class and not paying attention when I should have been, and um, they kind of just ended up with well, they didn't really have a context at the time when I was drawing them in like junior high, middle school and stuff,
mm,
and then like when it came time to like find a creative outlet for myself that I could focus on after hours, I kind of just like revisited those things, and I'm like, what if I put them in this like historic context? And I'd bought an old house at the
mm.
time, and was starting to get interested in like local history and stuff, and so they just kind of like melded together. And yeah, the writing just kind of, I feel very shaky about my writing still. I feel less confident about it than my art. But
Mm,
and I know I've made mistakes and and
mm,
but there's been a lot of like learning along the way. And and I just I just try my best to write as authentically as I can, and to just try to let these characters be who they are, and let them just kind of steer the plot, and because they're the things I put the most thought into, more so than like
sure.
I don't like create a plot and then fit characters into it
Mm.
to try to like um you know uh
Just serve the
yeah, they're
plot.
not
It's
really
like
like,
the
yeah, they're,
characters kind of drive it in
yeah,
themselves.
exactly, they're not the cogs that are like servicing the plot. They are like, it's the kind of the opposite. It's like the plot is what evolves
Mm,
from their decisions. They're bad decisions. But yeah. So yeah, that's I guess my approach to writing has been largely that, and then just like trying to capture some sense of historicity, um,
Mm.
and to use a obnoxious word like verisimilitude with like the 1920s, even though it's like a total abstraction of the 20s,
Sure,
necessarily,
sure.
because like I didn't live through the 20s, and I like the only impression I have of it is through what I can read and and such. So,
Mm.
or old footage I can watch, or um, books from the period that I can turn to.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's kind of, it has to be a fictional version of it, but you can still kind of like, I guess, aim for some sense of realism in it, even if you're drawing cartoon characters in a sense. So
Sure.
yeah, but yeah, I know I hear from a lot of creative people like that they don't know when they're good enough to start something, or they feel like they can't start their passion project until they're good enough, quote unquote. And I just would like
Mm.
to emphasize that good enough is a fantasy place that doesn't
Yep.
exist. And so like the way you learn to do the thing you want to do is not by like studying to do it, or like by standing on the sidelines and like thinking about doing it or preparing to do it. It's by just doing it. That's like where you do the most like intense learning. And that happened to me
Mm.
both with like working in the game industry when I had to just pick up 3D and use it. It wasn't reading about using 3D software, or watching videos, or it, or watching other people do it. It was by just like getting your hands on it and doing it. And the same happened with comics. Like I
Mm.
didn't know what I was doing when I started, and I have a much better sense of what I'm doing now, even though there's still so much to learn. Like I still like half the
Sure.
time. I think any artist will tell you they're like, I have no idea what I'm doing at any point. We're all just kind of winging it, but the way you get better is to just do the thing. I don't know if maybe you have
Yeah.
thoughts about that too, but
Oh yeah, like I mean, I'm flattered that at the time, like back in what the early days, that you liked my stuff,
mhm.
because if I try to listen back to the early stuff now, which I don't, because I it makes me cringe, but not because of the material, but because
Yeah,
of I've definitely gotten so much better
yeah,
since then.
yeah.
So it's absolutely like valuable to tell people, like, yeah, there's never gonna be like, in fact, like putting it out there is going to help you get better,
Hmm.
to get to that point where you're very comfortable and
Yeah,
very,
because
but
that's
even then you're always going to be striving to be better and better
right.
and better.
Yeah.
So there's value, I think, in like, and that's why I leave the Tumblr stuff all up. Like,
Hmm.
you can, it's all there. People like have gone back and like, I know, and like I did like an interview, and like they pulled up some of like the old stuff, and I was like, oh no, but I was
Yeah,
like,
I
but that's what it's there for. It's
yeah.
there for, you know to people, for people to see, like, you can hear the growth, I think,
Yeah,
throughout the years of
I
it.
think it's generally a good sign if you do cringe at stuff you did some years back, because
Mm,
it means your sense of what's good and not has evolved,
mm.
and your ability to do better has evolved. But yeah, I get the same thing. Like people will occasionally tag me on Twitter or something with some piece of art they commissioned from me or got from me at like uh, 15 years ago or something, and
Sure, sure,
and I'm
sure.
like, oh my god, that's still on the internet. Oh no. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's heartwarming that people still like remember some of that stuff,
Mm.
and you have to bear in mind that like other people's perception of it will be probably more lenient than your own.
Of course.
um
Yeah.
you're gonna be your worst critic, as they say, but
Yeah.
and that's kind of a necessity as a creative person. I think you just kind of have to be a little hard on yourself, not to the extent that you discourage yourself, but I think if
Mm.
you ever lose that like desire to keep improving, you kind of are done. Like I don't know where you go
Absolutely.
from
Yeah.
there if you're not trying to get better, if you're not trying to learn more, because there's just a never ending amount to know and learn. And
Sure.
but yeah.
One other thing I was going to touch on is like, so yeah, hearing you talk about your writing process and how the characters sort of lead and everything.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean that definitely makes sense to me hearing that because like I mentioned before, like what drew me to want to like, give voices to these characters is that they were so well developed. Like
Mm.
it's not just enough for a character to have like a cool, quote unquote cool or like interesting design. Like
Right.
that helps, but
Yeah, yeah.
I think what is what draws me to, stuff is like if I read this character's dialogue and look at them like for me, and oftentimes I'll have to go into the booth, right, and I'm shown
Hmm.
a picture of a character and I'm shown dialogue, and they're just like, what do you think this character sounds like, and I have to just go with my gut.
Hmm.
uh the more well written and more developed the design is, both on an artistic scale and in the dialogue,
Right.
the easier it is for me to do. Like
Hmm.
sometimes, and so for like Lackadaisy, like I
Hmm.
looked at those characters and I know, like I don't need her to tell me what these characters sound like. Although I believe you actually did at one point, like
Oh, I think I might have.
somebody asked you like, what do you think the characters sound like, and you gave
Yeah, I
descriptions.
I feel sheepish about even answering that because it's like I guess like really part of the fun is that when you're doing like something like a comic is that you can let people have their own interpretation and kind of enjoy that's like
The
it
thing
becomes
is, though, I when I read it, I was like, I agree with these 100%. I was like, these all match up with what I thought the characters sounded
well,
like.
that's a good sign. That's good that hopefully
Yeah.
yeah, that means I'm like in some way imparting my intentions successfully.
Mm.
Uh but again, like there's also like some aspect of like the enjoyment you get from like maybe reading a book or
Mm.
reading a comic or something. You kind of get your own opportunity
Mm.
as like a viewer or reader to uh you develop your own adaptation basically in your own head and that's
Mm.
like you sort of like get the sense of ownership of the thing in that way
Sure.
and it
Sure.
becomes I don't know just it endears it to you in a way I think that maybe if you are laying all of the details out and just like explaining things to a reader instead of showing them
Mm.
things that you kind of lose it in the if you're a little too explicit about like a
Mm.
little too if you just like expound a little too much and so I look back at some of my question answering and I probably should have dodged some more of those questions but now I find myself in the interesting situation of having to actually cast actors
Mm.
in these roles and to come up with something where I didn't need to be quite so specific about like what their voices were even
Sure.
if I had a a specific idea in my head which I certainly did for characters like Mordecai and stuff and which you pretty much
Mm.
nailed. I mean we had to give you so little direction. I mean, like it was basically I'm kind of like veering off course here, but
Oh
uh
no, go for it.
like Fable was asking me for references for like, well, who would like actors and things that I would like associate with different characters to try to get a sense of like where we should even begin trying to cast voice
Sure.
actors. And like when it came to Mordecai, I was like, well, I mean, like the only thing I can think of is ProZD is Sung Wan. Is
Yeah.
he's like just the canon like not only in my head at this point like the canon Mordecai voice because he just like
Mm.
pretty much matched so well like what I was thinking but like so many other people as well I think probably I mean it kind of like reversed like you said earlier like I gave you some exposure early on but I think like kind of a role reversal there where like you have a much
Mm.
bigger audience at this point and so like I think a lot of people know of Lackadaisy specifically because of what you've done and so like I think Mordecai voice is pretty well like what you established in the heads of many of my readers. And so I mentioned your name. I was like, well, thinking like we couldn't possibly get you to do this little project with us, but
Mm.
I was thinking like you're just like way beyond that at this point. So but I
Mm.
mentioned you as like to Fable as Fable is the director for the audience who may not know
Mm.
on the animated short film we're doing, and uh, to say like, well, here's a thing we can like reference as like a starting point to say like this is kind of where we're aiming. And Fable's
Sure.
just like, well, I'll just like reach out to him. I'm like, what? No, I don't think Fable knew who you were. So I was like, but Fable is like great because they are much more extroverted and gregarious than I am, and just
Sure.
like uninhibited about just approaching anyone and asking them to, like,
Yeah,
you want to
yeah,
do this thing. And I think they're less afraid of being told no and like go away or whatever. But
yeah. Right, right.
so it's been great to be working with them. But yeah, they just like kind of just went out and reached out to you where I was too much of a wuss to even ask. And we were both delighted to hear you say, oh yeah, I'd be interested. And um
Yeah.
but yeah, I'm not even sure where I started with it. It was something about
Well, well, I'll just say, like, when they sent me that email, I was like, "Holy shit!" I was like, "This has come full circle." Like I was extremely flat. I like when I think they might have said it, or I don't know if you said it, but somebody said that I was the in your mind the canon voice, and I was like,
yeah.
because when I mean, for me, whenever I read Like a Daisy, the voice is what I do because that's for me, and I guess I had my own sort of ownership, but especially with Mordecai. Like
Hmm.
Mordecai, I was like, this is what this guy sounds like,
Yeah.
and uh, so to hear that the creator of the character agrees with me, and like it really meant a lot to me, and also
Oh.
just because of going back to my history, like you and other creators were like a big help in having me get anywhere where I am now. So for me it was like, oh yeah, absolutely. And then it's been really fun, not only with the short film, which was really fun to record for,
Mhm.
but we've been doing the comics,
Yeah, the
like,
mini comic tubs.
which, and I've done those on
Yeah,
YouTube.
yeah.
And it was just like, now I get to do these like at my current level. Like I
Yes.
get to like revisit these. And also like a lot of them are with Jason, who's great. Like
Yeah,
I love working with him whenever we have like
yeah,
back and forth
he's a lot of
dialogue.
fun, and just listening to the two of you bounce off of each other has been just hilarious and just such an enjoyable experience. Like I can't tell
Hmm.
you the smile that's like across my face the entire time we're doing like voice recording sessions is almost
Hmm.
painful because it's like my face is aching afterwards. Like every time we did a voice recording session because I was just laughing and smiling the whole time at like what you guys come up with. It's just so I don't know. Voice actors are a special breed of entertainer, and I don't know if they realize just how like naturally entertaining they are, even when they're just goofing around. Like it's been a real joy working with all of the voice actors, and a extreme privilege to have you like participating in this project with us. Like thank you. I mean,
I mean, I appreciate it. It's been extremely fun. Like, and also, I mean, because with voice acting, well, I'm not gonna say the majority of the time, but for me anyway, the majority of the time you're usually alone,
mhm.
in a booth.
Yeah,
I have done ensemble recordings before. Usually, like animated stuff will do that, but even with a lot of animated stuff, I just go in alone.
yeah.
So just getting to do scenes with like Jason or with Michael, like both who are very good, like and
Hmm.
so for me it's like if I get to like be in a scene with another actor who I'm like, or they are, this person is good, like,
Hmm.
and I don't have to worry about like we can keep up with each other,
Right, right.
that it's so much fun.
Oh,
Like
glad to hear that.
I think there was one time, I think I forget if it was Fable or you, but one of you, or some, it might have been Fable, was like, "Oh, will we be able to do this in time?" And it was like a Victor Mordecai comic, and I was
Hmm.
like, "I think we'll be like." I think they were like, "I don't know, we have like an hour left. Do you think we can do another comic?" And I was like, "I think we can do like
Uh,
two or three."
yeah,
Listen, I
yeah.
think Jason and I can knock these out
Yeah,
easy.
you guys just have such a feel for the characters at this point that it requires so little like going back over and having you like say the line over and over again. It's just like maybe once or twice for safety or just to make sure the recording is sound. But
Hmm.
yeah, I mean like you guys and you have such a like uh spontaneity about like the energy and the back and forth that it's just like it's something you can't really capture if we were recording you individually. And
Mm-mm.
I think that's been a real benefit to being able to do like this small project. I mean, as scale goes, it's like it's pretty minuscule compared to like something that has like a multi-million-dollar budget or like a your average TV show or anything. But the big
Mm.
advantage I think we have is that we have a small enough crew that we can collaborate in ways that where in the studio system you really don't get that kind of like the voice actors don't really interact with animators or the storyboard
Mm.
artists, and the writers don't really talk to the animators either, and they're all just kind of like segregated in their own little like workstations, like doing their thing. I mean, and it's got to be sort of like a, it's got to be partitioned like that in a way for the sake of turning things out on a deadline. But with this thing, because it's like this one short film we're doing, and I mean, hopefully there'll be other stuff to come, but we'll see. That remains to
Fingers
be
crossed.
seen. Yeah, I don't know. I really have no idea what to expect, with this, like we have this opportunity to have this, like basically we do our studio is a virtual studio, and it's more or less a Discord server where we have our whole
Mm.
project. And so everybody gets to interact with each other, and we do voice chat sessions between like storyboard artists and animators, and we get feedback from everybody on the crew about this and that, about character designs and things. And it's been just like really nice to be able to see artists intermingle and bounce off of each other like that, and artists from so many different
Mm.
like disciplines too, like the voice actors giving commentary on character design and stuff, and like and kind of like cheering on the animators anytime they see something they really love. It's just been so rewarding. I mean, even if this
Mm.
whole thing like didn't go anywhere, like just the having had the opportunity to do it uh is just like this once in a lifetime kind of magical thing. So
Yeah,
yeah.
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 I mean, I again, like, I am glad to be a part of it. Before we sort of finish up, I do like to give the guests an opportunity. Is there any last sort of topic or you'd like to talk about, or a question for me, or anything you'd like? Otherwise, no pressure. I just like to offer that
Oh,
at some point during the
I
podcast.
I ran my mouth so much. I don't know. I don't know what else
We
to
did cover
say.
a lot of ground,
I guess
so.
like if anything, like if anybody can get anything out of this, I hope it's that they just like go start doing their thing, get their stuff out there.
Mm,
Like there's this
mm-hmm.
like probably a lot of young artists, whether they're voice actors or animators or storyboard artists or illustrators or whatever, get this advice to like go network. And of course, like I think the mental image a lot of us get from that is like handing out a business card or like
Yeah,
portfolio
yeah.
samples at a convention or something. And while you can do that, I think probably the most effective thing is to just like get yourself involved in projects with other people. Like
Mm,
so many of the people we've brought on board our team for the short film have just been people that like because Fable's worked in studios, they know people, and so they've reached out to them, and those people have reached out to other people that they know, and like in the voice actor community, like all the voice actors seem to know each other. Like so, the voice
yes,
actor
yeah,
community is
yeah.
very tight. So if like you're trying to get into voice acting, I guess I would say meet other voice actors, just like
Yep.
in what and if you can like or just like start doing like fan projects and things to like get your stuff out there, and then like have a basis
Mm-hmm.
on which to like interact with other voice actors, because that's how you find jobs and opportunities and things. And
Yeah.
like while there's certainly a lot of like my own artistic aspirations and things and stuff going into this project, and like my own ambitions and stuff and my ego, like I think if I do something here and I it doesn't really go anywhere after this, it's just like a standalone thing, which that alone will be great. But like if it can provide kind of like a little bit of a roadmap for other artists to just like figure out how they can launch their indie thing and get it off the ground and get it funded and like
Mm,
put a team together and have a virtual studio and make a thing, I think that's just like that's really cool, and I hope that that's what happens here, at least in part.
mm,
So
mm,
yeah.
mm.
Thank you for being
Yeah.
part of it. In any case, it
I,
means the
I
world.
again, thank you for having me. Where can people find you?
I am on Twitter at Lackadaisy Cats, If you just search Lackadaisy at Google, though, you'll probably, I think it's probably the first thing that comes up at this point.
Mm-hmm.
Lackadaisy.com is the website. Little Daisy Cafe, all one word, is the URL for our uh, devlog, which is where we're kind of just like blogging about our progress on the film. So if you want to keep up
Mm.
with that, we do we do occasional like live streams where we do like shop talk. We talk with other artists and people like making animations and indie films themselves and stuff on YouTube. That's I think YouTube/C/uh Lackadaisy Comic.
Mm.
But yeah, I mean, just Google Lackadaisy, you'll find it. It's
Yeah, and I can't stress it enough. The comic is great, and the short film is gonna be great as well. And I'm in it, so go
yeah,
you just
yeah.
support it. But not just because I'm in it, but because it is going to be great.
Thank you so much.
And yeah, thank you so much for sitting down. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Likewise, thank you for having me.